At 5:53 a.m. on October 5, 1943, rain lashed the flight deck of the USS Yorktown. In the half-light before dawn, engines roared one by one as American fighters disappeared into the stormy Pacific sky. Ensign Robert Duncan waited his turn. He was 22 years old. From a small town in Illinois, he had learned to fly barely 2 years earlier. He had never killed anyone. Ahead of him lay Wake Island, and somewhere above it, Japanese fighters would be waiting. When the deck crew gave the signal, Duncan shoved the throttle forward. The F6F Hellcat surged down the wet deck and hurled itself into the darkness. What happened in the next 30 minutes would mark the beginning of the end for the most feared fighter aircraft of the Pacific War. The plane that ruled the sky. For nearly 18 months, the Mitsubishi A6M Zero had terrorized American pilots. From Pearl Harbor to the Philippines, from Wake Island to the Dutch East Indies, the Zero dominated the air. It was lighter than anything the Americans flew. It climbed faster, turned tighter, stayed airborne longer. Japanese engineers had achieved something extraordinary: a carrier-based fighter that outperformed land-based aircraft. Against Chinese pilots, the Zero achieved a kill ratio of 12-1. Against British aircraft in early 1942, it slaughtered entire formations while barely taking losses. American pilots learned one rule above all others: do not fight the Zero. If one got on your tail, you dove and ran. You did not turn. You did not climb. You hoped your armor held long enough to reach a carrier. The Navy's frontline fighter, the F-4F Wildcat, was tough, but it was outclassed. Pilots survived only by teamwork, discipline, and refusing to fight on Japanese terms. Survival, however, was not victory. The mistake that changed the war. In June 1942, a 19-year-old Japanese pilot named Tadayoshi Koga took off on a mission that would unknowingly change the war. During an attack on Dutch Harbor in the Aleutian Islands, Koga's Zero was hit by ground fire. Oil poured from the engine. He searched for an emergency landing strip on nearby Akutan Island. From the air, it looked perfect, flat, grassy, solid. It wasn't. The moment his wheels touched down, they sank into hidden mud. The aircraft flipped violently onto its back. Koga's neck snapped on impact. He died instantly. His wingmen circled overhead. They were ordered to destroy any downed Zero, but the aircraft looked intact, and the canopy was closed. Unsure whether Koga was alive, they hesitated, then left. For 5 weeks, the Zero sat untouched in the fog and rain, until an American patrol plane spotted it. Unlocking the Zero's secrets. The recovery team found Koga's body still in the cockpit. They buried him with military honors, then dragged the aircraft from the bog. What the Navy recovered stunned them. The Zero wasn't invincible. It was fragile. No armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. A lightweight airframe built entirely around performance. Test flights revealed fatal flaws. At high speed, the Zero could barely roll. Its controls stiffened dramatically above 200 knots. Its engine cut out under -G. A few .50 caliber hits could tear it apart. The Zero was deadly, but only if it controlled the fight. Once American pilots knew its weaknesses, everything changed. America's answer. By the time the Zero's secrets were uncovered, Grumman was already building its replacement, the F6F Hellcat. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't light, it wasn't subtle, it was brutal. Powered by a 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine, wrapped in armor and armed with 6.50 caliber machine guns, the Hellcat was built to kill and survive. It could dive faster than the Zero, roll harder at speed, climb aggressively above medium altitude, and absorb punishment that would obliterate a Japanese fighter. Grumman's philosophy was simple: protect the pilot. Bring him home alive. Wake Island. The first test, back over Wake Island, Robert Duncan burst through the storm clouds into clear sky. Ahead of him, a Zero. The Japanese pilot never saw him. Duncan dove. The Hellcat accelerated like nothing he'd ever flown. The airspeed needle screamed upward. He squeezed the trigger. 6 machine guns roared. The Zero disintegrated. Moments later, Duncan spotted another, a veteran Japanese ace who pulled into a vertical climb, confident no American fighter could follow. The Hellcat followed anyway. It kept climbing. At the top of the arc, Duncan fired. The Zero exploded. In minutes, the most feared fighter in the Pacific had been proven mortal. The sky turns American. From that moment on, the balance of air power shifted rapidly. At Tarawa, Rabaul, the Marshalls, Hellcats tore through Japanese formations at ratios of 10-1, then 20-1. Japanese pilots noticed immediately. American fighters no longer fled. They attacked. They climbed. They stayed. The Zero was no longer the hunter. It was prey. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The final proof came in June 1944. Over the Philippine Sea, nearly 900 American aircraft faced more than 400 Japanese planes in the largest carrier battle in history. Radar spotted the enemy long before they arrived. Hellcats met them head-on. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft was annihilated before reaching the fleet. Entire formations vanished from the sky. By nightfall, over 600 Japanese aircraft destroyed. 3 carriers sunk, American losses. Minimal, a Navy pilot, summed it up simply: it was just like an old-time turkey shoot. Japanese naval aviation never recovered. Why the Hellcat won the Zero was built to attack. The Hellcat was built to endure. America could replace aircraft, replace pilots, replace losses. Japan could not. By 1945, the Zero, once supreme, was obsolete, outnumbered, and outmatched. Legacy: in just 30 months, over 12,000 Hellcats were built. They destroyed more than 5,000 enemy aircraft. They accounted for 75% of all U.S. Navy air victories in World War II. The Hellcat didn't just defeat the Zero, it erased Japanese air power from the Pacific. Closing, the F6F Hellcat was not the fastest fighter of the war. It was not the most beautiful. It was not the most advanced. But it was the right aircraft, at the right time, in the right numbers. And that is how wars are truly won. If you enjoyed this story, like the video to help us share more forgotten history. Subscribe for more untold stories of World War II. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering.